27th Amendment, originally proposed September 25th, 1789, ratified May 7th, 1992. No law varying the compensation for the services of the senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. Do you want to start with the ratification or do you want to start with the actual text?
Well, first though, yeah, I gotta say, this is the only amendment that passed in our lifetime.
Yes. Yes. My mom has lived through a few, but this is the only one for Gen X and most millennials.
Yes, I would have been 12 when this was ratified.
I would have been 17 because we hadn't hit my birthday yet.
Anyway, the first part, let's talk about the length, because we talked about the fastest amendment being passed earlier. This was the longest.
This one took the longest. This was actually when I was a kid, when we were kids, you would sometimes get these things and they would have the Bill of Rights and then would have these two other amendments down at the bottom that had been proposed but had not been ratified. And I do not remember what the other one was. I could look it up, but this was the other one. And it had been sitting at the bottom of that list for 200 years. And a teenager, as a class project, decided it was time to ratify it and resurrected it and got the push going to ratify this as an amendment. Thought, hey, this is a good idea. Why don't we have this? And I don't even think the guy was old enough to vote. Going back to our last amendment. I think this was literally like a 16-year-old initially. Was like, hey, we should do the thing.
That they can't give themselves a pay raise until they get elected again.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm okay with this. This is a good amendment. There are a lot of not ratified amendments that are bad. This one I'm okay with. Like, it has to take the theory behind this is you're not going to be able to just vote your pay raises all of the time and have no consequences from it. In theory, what this means is you have to answer to your constituents after you voted yourself a pay raise.
They're like, why did you do that for? I don't think so, buddy.
Yeah. And that's perfectly reasonable. And quite a lot of people agreed that it's perfectly reasonable. And so it passed. It got ratified. And I think this goes back to the increase in representation these days, is that more people were able to look at this amendment and say, yeah, I support that, and I would vote for someone who ratified that. Instead of it just being the elite who are like, no, we can be trusted.
Is that why it took so long to pass?
That's why it took so long to pass. At least that's my personal understanding of the situation. Is it's all about self-policing was considered to be all that they needed when it was the same people who would be doing most of the voting, especially for senator. You know, it's fine. We're all fine here. And recently the idea has been, well, but what if you're not? What do we do?
Yeah, self-policing hopefully won't be an issue.
I am really of the opinion that self-policing never works. One of the things I would do if I were restructuring police departments, for example, is I would make internal affairs a separate organization so that the police department is not investigating itself, because you can't trust that. A lot of regulation is, but we can't trust you to take care of that yourself. You need someone telling you that you have to do it. And that's the purpose of this law. of this amendment.
So from now on, if they want a pay raise, it can only happen every 2 years.
Yeah, and in practice,
do they give them pay raises that often?
I'm looking at that. All I'm seeing right now is raise for people who work there. Elon Musk is apparently claiming that they're planning a 40% pay increase, and no.
Well, even if they did, they won't take effect until 2026.
Yeah, pay for House of Representatives. There we go. The compensation for most senators, representatives, delegates, and the resident commissioner from Puerto Rico is $174,000 a year. The levels have remained unchanged since 2009.
So they have given themselves at least one raise since this was passed.
Yeah. The initial pay for all members of the House and Senate in 1789 was $6 a day, which works out to $147 a day in 2023 dollars.
Probably, I think that's more than I make a day.
Well, that's certainly more than I make a day, but let's do the math on that real quick, and we'll assume a 30-day month. Well, then we'll just do my year. $53,000 a year.
Yep,
$53,655.
That's more than I make in a year.
It's well more than I make in a year, but yeah. But
and that was just in back then money.
Yeah, well, so $147 a day. Seven times 365. Yeah, no, that is in current dollars, 53,000. So, like, it's more than you make, it's more than I make, but it's not a fortune. And it's also worth noting that per diem is per day they were working. So if Congress was in session for 40 days of the year, you did not make the full 53,000, 54,000. You made considerably less than that.
Yeah.
1790, huh?
So I was going to say, I know presidents still get salaries after they retire, but I don't know if these guys do.
There is a pension. How much your pension is depends a lot on how long you've been serving. It's a whole thing. I would have to look it all up, and I'm gonna get there, but I'm delighted by the fact that the next pay raise was in 1795, and it was to $7 a day. And then that was the rate until 1855. So congressional pay was static for 60 years. And then it went up to $3,000 a year. And it's been yearly since then.
It's not that important amendment, but it's still kind of important.
Yeah. The thing I've long said is that Congress gets paid because Congress needs to get paid. It's a job, and if you're a member of Congress, you really can't hold a different job very easily.
Because I think we read about earlier in the Constitution, they can't hold certain jobs. They can't hold
certain jobs, and even if you could, like, let's say that you became a member of Congress, and that meant you would have to spend a substantial part of your year in Washington, D.C. Would you be able to hold your current job?
No.
No. They wouldn't give you the time off for that. It'd be more in their best interest to just hire someone else. And if you own your own business, you've got to figure out what you're going to do about that. And if you're a lawyer, it cuts into your ability to do certain amounts of work there. And if you're a teacher, there are
And
a lot of jobs.
and if you want to keep your house, you want to keep your house where you live, can move back to later on. You guys keep making the payments for your house.
Yeah, and you have to keep your house because otherwise you can't stay a member of Congress. So you have to pay members of Congress. You just do. And there's an argument that they make too much money. But the big argument in favor of an increased salary is, number one, it makes it easier for people who aren't rich to get the job because they can afford to get the job.
Yeah.
They can afford to maintain 2 residences. And the other thing is, there is the whole lobbyist thing, and it's worth more money than $174,000 a year to be a lobbyist, especially if you've been in Congress for several terms. And so if you can quit your $174,000 a year job and go on to a $2 million a year job as a lobbyist, why wouldn't you do that? And that's one of the reasons that people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants to prevent Congress members from being lobbyists and to make finances of elected officials more transparent, because that's a much more effective anti-corruption tool than not giving members of Congress salaries and pay raises.
Yeah, but basically this was so they couldn't give themselves pay raises anytime they wanted to.
Right. Like, you can't give yourself 3 pay raises over the course of a 2-year period because that's ludicrous. But you're still allowed to give yourself a pay raise.
You just gotta hope that you get reelected to take for you gotta help your people that your consistents agree to that pay raise.
Honestly, the most sensible time for Congress to pass itself a pay raise is right now. Because in 2 years, who's going to remember? Like, you can run on, well, this person voted for a pay raise and let's make sure they don't get it. But surely more important things will have happened in the intervening 2 years so that when the pay raise does go into effect, nobody cares anymore.
So Congress, if you're listening to this, here's your chance.
Pay raise now. And I'm not saying that members of Congress should be making the salary that they could make as a lobbyist, because I really don't think that, frankly, I don't think people need that kind of salary. But it is a known fact, because he's said it himself, that one of the reasons that Clarence Thomas takes the let's be clear, bribes that he does is because he doesn't make the kind of money he thinks he should. And while I have no sympathy for Clarence Thomas on this subject, because go on, sir, live for a year under my budget. And yes, okay, the cost of living where he lives is not cheap, but also I can't afford to pay the cost of living where I live, so what do you do? But I do think that the amount it currently is reasonable, given A, the amount of trust and responsibility involved in the job, B, how easy it would be for these people to become corrupt to find other sources of income, and C, because I do think it would be nice if more lower income people could afford to run for Congress. One of the reasons for the gerontocracy we currently have is that so much money is concentrated in the boomer generation that the younger generations can't afford to run for office.
Do you know how much it costs to run for office in the state or federal elections?
It varies. It's going to be cheaper to run for office in, rural Montana than it is to run for office in New York, like New York City. Just because nobody really cares. It is extraordinarily expensive to run for Senate, for example. Especially because Senate doesn't matter what state you're from. There are so few senators that it doesn't matter.
That's for a federal Senate, not talking about state Senate.
Your state Senate, you can probably go a lot cheaper. Roughly $10 billion was spent on the 2024 congressional races. The most expensive races in 2024 were all Senate seats. All the most expensive Senate races were Texas, Ohio, Montana, Maryland, California, Arizona, Wisconsin, Florida, Nevada, and Michigan.
Yes, there were a lot of Ohio for our two senators running. There were a lot of
over $140 million was spent on the Ohio Senate race of 2024.
There's somebody for the Ohio senator that I did not see any for my representative.
Well, the most expensive House races were in Virginia, Colorado, California, 3 from New York, 2 from California, Arizona, Louisiana, and Alaska.
Was there a lot of commercials for your representative that you saw on TV or streaming services nowadays?
I could probably look that up, how much they spent.
But do you remember seeing any at all?
I don't remember seeing any for Senate. I might have, but I knew who I was voting for, so it didn't matter. I don't think I saw any for representative.
It's
but
funny
I knew who I was voting for, so it didn't matter.
It was funny because you think that there were 2 years, so you think they'd be more active. Because I don't know, was any of your senators even running for office?
Oh yeah. What Maria Cantwell, I believe, was running in the 2024 election. And I knew who I was voting for. It was fine. I saw a fair number for governor. I saw a lot for state house. There was one guy who wanted me to know that there was going to be a new sheriff in town. And I don't even live in his district. But I live like a couple of miles, I think, from his district. So I understand why I kept getting the elections, or the commercials, but it was still really annoying.
Yeah.
Sir, I'm not voting for you, even if I want to.
But yeah, all I saw in my thing was president and my senator. Of course, I ever saw. I didn't see any. I paid attention to all of them, but those are the ones I saw mainly: senator and president.
I saw very few for senator, or for president rather, because they don't bother spending money in Washington for president, because Washington is going to go blue. Washington has gone blue for decades. The last time we went red was, I think, 1984. They're not going to win Washington. It's not competitive to spend money here.
The biggest thing about senators was this guy's for abortion, this guy's not for abortion.
Yeah. To give you an idea of how blue Washington is, I was looking over my voter handbook, and the most anti-abortion the guy running for governor was willing to be was that he would follow state law on the subject. The Republican was anti-abortion personally, but for abortion and gay rights, both of those, he was like, I will follow state law as required. And that is as anti-abortion and anti-gay rights as you're allowed to be in Washington and have a thought of winning.
Ours was, I'm going to pass a national ban.
Yeah, yeah. Um, our senators were more like, yeah, here's our abortion access legislation that we tried to get passed. Like, well, you and I live in very different states.
Well, hopefully your two senators will stop my senator.
Oh, bless. I mean, both of my senators have a lot more seniority.
Yeah, because my one senator is got new in office now, so he's a newbie. Of
Yeah.
course, now I'm gonna have two. We're gonna have two newbies now, maybe because the governor's got to appoint a new senator for the now vice president.
Yep. And one of my senators is actually taking a pay cut this year because you get extra money for being the president pro tem, and now that the Republicans control the Senate, she doesn't get that money anymore because she's not president pro tem anymore.
He's the minority whip or something, or
Something like that, yeah.
I think that pretty much wraps up the last amendment.
Yes, it does.
We return. We'll talk about what we learned today, or the last few months, actually, not just today.